We've watched Millie Bobby Brown take on the Upside Down with her powers, and she's also solved crimes as Enola Holmes. Now she gets to be a princess and showcase some daring do in the Netflix action fantasy Damsel. Can she conquer this genre, or does she and the movie need to be rescued? A dutiful damsel agrees to marry a handsome prince, only to find the royal family has recruited her as a sacrifice to repay an ancient debt. Thrown into a cave with a fire-breathing dragon, she must rely on her wits and will to survive. So in addition to Millie Bobby Brown, this features Angela Bassett, Robin Wright, Ray Winstone, Nick Robinson, and Shohreh Aghdashloo as the voice of the dragon. The whole premise of this is that Brown, as Elodie, is married off to a prince and then promptly given as a sacrifice to a dragon. She then spends the next 80-ish minutes crawling around crevices and jumping over pits in an attempt to find a way out of this massive cave. Now, I loved the look and the atmosphere of the cave system. There is some massive scale to it, and it really comes to life when the camera will pull way back to then show how tall the cave roof is in relation to this tiny little Elodie running around the ground. I mean, there are stone pillars, cliffs, and tight tunnels. Each of these are formidable obstacles in Elodie's attempted escape. Plus, there's also the threat of the dragon. And the dragon looks good too. The CGI creates an excellent scaly texture, and when it begins to breathe fire, that effect is awesome. We can watch the fire travel up through the throat, glowing more intensely as the explosive lava-like fire erupts into an intended victim. And once we get a good look at the dragon's size and presence, the film continues to show the beast, not trying to hide it in deep dark shadows so that we can barely see anything. There isn't terrible CGI to obscure, so we get to see the ferocity in all its glory. Now, Brown as Elodie, she spends an unacceptable amount of time grunting and screaming as her only piece of dialogue. I mean, sure, she's alone, and sometimes either angry, frustrated, or in pain. So some screaming and grunting, it makes sense. But there's probably a 15 to 20 minute chunk that is the only thing we get from her. And that's kind of where this film falls apart. The action sequences are fun, and the graphics are great, but the dialogue is almost consistently terrible, and then when you couple that with an abhorrently thin and basic story, the entire presentation loses intrigue and turns into a forgettable mess. Now, I was really looking forward to this also. A year or so ago, we got another princess action movie starring Joey King, aptly called The Princess. Now, it had some contained space exciting action, but the rest was just kind of there. And that's the same for Damsel. The majority of this film takes place in a contained space. I mean, yeah, it's a massive cave rather than a spiraling tower. Still, though, I mean, it's very difficult to escape the confines of each of those. Now, I don't necessarily mind if a story is thin if it can be hugely entertaining in other ways. But here, the enjoyable fun value of the action, it waned over time, leaving just the story to carry the narrative. But because there's zero development and the story basically shoots its wad right at the start, there's not even any suspense. I mean, there is a moment towards the end of the film that I think had it come at the start, the motivations would have been much more intense, giving Elodie a true sense of purpose. There's this moment involving another character that spurs Elodie on, and I think it's an obvious arc. But by reversing the order of events, now we've got thrilling motivation for the story to rely on. And I think almost all of the acting in this, it's fine. Nothing spectacular or overwhelmingly awesome. I mean, Brown can hold her own in action sequences and with physical stunts too. So I would like to see her do another action film with a better developed storyline. Shohreh Aghdashloo as the voice of the dragon, she's one of the huge highlights of the movie. Her naturally raspy voice, it's just perfect, and invokes a serpent-like presence that I thought could be chilling. I mean, I actually wanted to get more time with her, even though we do get a decent amount of exposition from the character. And then out of Angela Bassett, Ray Winstone, and Robin Wright, Bassett had the most presence, but all three were incredibly underutilized for their caliber. Wright is meant to be sweetly menacing, but neither of those are achieved, so she just sits dully in the middle with a forgettable character. Same for Winstone. He has moments where it could be epic or emotional, but the character is so rote and predictable that his scenes are just ho-hum at best. Plus, we're never given enough time with him and Elodie to showcase any real paternal connection. Now, luckily, we do get that to a degree with Bassett. I mean, maternal, not paternal. But she gets to showcase warmth, concern, and compassion, which I think is nice and effective. But her character is stuck in the backseat for so much of this, it's kind of too little, too late. Now, I'm not trying to rail against this or even destroy it. There are fun moments, and the action can be exciting, especially when augmented by the good CGI. And for a casual watch, this is easy to put on and have playing. But once you shut it off, all memory will just fade away like the smoke from the dragon's fire. The story suffered from being too simple and thin, while also not developing hugely dynamic characters or arcs to offset the blandness. With some small story changes, the film as a whole has the potential to become emotionally powerful with urgency and suspense. But as it stands, it's a pile of wet sticks that never seems to catch a spark. There's no sex, nudity, or profanity, but a lot of violence. I give Damsel 2.5 out of 5 couches. Now, if you're looking for something to put on in the background while you do something else, this is going to work. Otherwise, you may want to give something else a go first. All right, so what are some movies that you are looking forward to seeing in the next couple of weeks? Let me know what you want to watch in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.